And it says we're live. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this world, on this beautiful world of ours. I've got something a little bit different on my channel from what I normally do today. I had a Christian friend of mine reach out to me a few weeks ago, Gavin, who wanted to have a discussion with us about with me about beliefs. So he's here to do that today. Gavin, I don't think he's used to going on YouTube. I think this is a bit of a new experience to him. So I'm going to ask everyone a few things of people in the live chat. First of all, Gav is kind of, this is new to Gav, and he's stepping into a thing where there's going to be, majority of people who watch this are going to be atheists. So he's kind of stepping a little bit into the lion's den. So could we ask please treat that with the respect and the courtesy that deserves. Second of all, I'm going to make it very clear, because of some couple of DMs I've had earlier today, that I'm going to be asking the mods in the chat that if there is any drama or being brought forth that is nothing to do with this conversation, that is not going to be tolerated today, and I'm going to make that very clear right now. So please don't do it. Now, I've got with my other friend Chris. You all know him as Atheist Pastor. He's going to, I suppose, you'd say, moderate and help keep it civil between us. This isn't really going to be a debate as such, but maybe just a conversation so myself and Gavin maybe can help understand each other's positions a little bit better. So what I'll do is I'll hand it over to Chris, who will kind of take over the stream, I suppose, a bit from now on. So, Chris, over to you, my friend.
Yeah. So look, my goal here is to talk as little as possible. What I've said to both Jeff and Gavin is, obviously with my background, having studied theology at a university level and being a historian, if they do have anything they want a clarification on, I'm happy to offer a clarification. But look, ultimately, hopefully it's just the conversation guides itself pretty much. I'm happy to, I guess, help the conversation flow if I need to. And look, as I said to them both before, being an Aussie, if I get the opportunity to yell at a couple of Brits, well, it's a good day for me, isn't it? So look, I guess what I'll do is I'll guide the conversation this way, because most people who are watching know Jeff and Jeff's position. I'll throw down to you, Gavin. Do you want to give us a bit of a brief, I guess, on who you are, what your belief is, as far as I'm assuming it's Christian, but what denomination, and what led you to being in that denomination?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Jeff, for having me on your channel. Really appreciate it. So I guess my position or my background, is probably better to talk about my background, really. So in the sense, religion or Christianity wasn't something I was brought up with. My mum and dad didn't really hold a belief. I think my dad may have had some early kind of Catholicism in his upbringing, but it didn't really play a part, and it wasn't really on the radar for me as such. I probably, if I was pushed at a young age to ask, did I believe in God, I would have probably said yes, but I didn't really think about it. In fact, I was the only person in the school when we were all offered out Bibles. I was the only person in my year to refuse it, because I just thought, what's the point? I'm not someone that follows it. What's the point of having a Bible? So in a sense, up until the age of 16, it wasn't at all on my radar. And just very quickly to say, one night I was chatting to a friend whose parents were Christians, and he was just telling me what they believed in, and it just got me thinking, really. And I went away that evening and I said a prayer, and I felt something happened that wasn't, normal. I felt I kind of interacted in some way to a larger being than just what I was used to. So that was kind of the beginning. And for me, the obvious choice was to speak to somebody I knew who was going to a church. So I spoke to my mate and said, yeah, I had a bit of an experience of God, I think. And I ended up going to I guess at the time it was kind of an evangelical church, but probably not like a right-wing one, but quite probably left if we were going to put it anywhere. And throughout the last, how old am I now? 25 years, I've kind of gone along, had my ups and downs, and been involved in different churches, whether they are Anglican or sort of evangelical, or ones that are kind of don't quite fit any denomination. But that's probably where I sit most of all.
All right. So I guess what I would say then is, do you have any questions for Jeff about his position, just so we're all on a level playing field?
Yeah. So I suppose, yeah. I mean, I know a little bit just because I've watched a few of Jeff's YouTube videos and blogs and different things over the years, and obviously have a few mutual friends, so we know a little bit about each other. And I think, just to say, we've probably got more in common than we have differences in many ways, which I think is really good. Especially the football team we both support. I think that's important. But I suppose my question is, I know you've kind of been on a bit of a transition from looking sort of more involved in paganism to atheism, and I suppose my question is, what was the process of that? What kind of, well, how did you get to paganism, and how did you get to an atheist position in your thinking?
Okay, well, I guess for many years I probably would have just called myself an atheist. I didn't really, but I never really, but I don't know that I necessarily had any good reasons to hold that position. I mean, when obviously, I went to like C of E school or whatever, so we had the the daily prayers, that kind of thing, and I had to read, do a few Bible stories, but nothing too hardcore. I think my main exposure to Christianity was through when I joined the Cub Scouts or whatever, and we had to do the monthly church parades and sit through a sermon at least once a month. But I got to say that just a lot of what I heard at Christianity just didn't make sense to me. Now, obviously, that about 10 years ago, I got involved with a woman. We're not going to mention names on stream because I don't want people getting doxxed or anything. But I got involved with this woman who was, funny enough, was a Christian at the time, but was going through her own little transition towards paganism, and she talked to me about that a bit. And I found it quite interesting. And I guess similar to yourself, I was a bit, I wouldn't even say skeptical, but a little cynical of it to begin with. But again, I was in this sort of thing where I had a bit of an experience, like yourself, had a bit of a personal experience, which seemed very, very convincing to me, of like an experience with one of the Norse gods. And like, I mean, for a number of years, that kind of had me convinced. And now, suppose partly, obviously, when I broke up with that girl, and I wasn't around a lot of that pagan community again, I started asking myself a lot of those questions again. And I guess I kind of was starting to realize that I didn't really have a good reason to believe in the existence of a deity, and that personal experience of mine was probably like a far more rational explanation for it, because of like the way the human brain can work at times. And I guess I just slowly got to this position where I don't really believe in the existence of any deities or of the supernatural. I have no, which is I suppose what I suppose generally speaking is what atheism is the lack of belief in a god. Although we know there's actually debate amongst that in our own community, which I won't get into because it causes some very heated discussions. But I guess, but my guess, I guess I come to the position I don't, really have any reason, or there's not enough evidence that leads me to believe in the existence of a deity, as would be my position.
No, that's good. I guess I think what's interesting, whatever your belief system, whatever our belief system is, I think we're all on this kind of trajectory, and I think it's good to be open-minded enough to change that. Or obviously I've got a reasonably fixed belief, but actually I think it's important that if I come to a conclusion one day, that's a load of rubbish, I need to be able to be flexible enough to do that. So I think whether you're transitioning from one belief system to another, I think being open-minded for me is really important.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. That's helpful.
So if I can just interrupt and ask you both the same question here. Are you 100% stuck on both of your beliefs, or would you change your beliefs with evidence? So I'll throw to you first, Jeff. Would you change your belief with evidence?
With evidence, yeah. I mean, if the evidence is overwhelming, you've got to, if that's where the evidence leads, then you'd have to alter that. I would have to, if I was going to be intellectually honest, alter that position. And if it turned out that the Christian God was the one true God, and the evidence for that became just overwhelming, where it's undeniable, you'd have to accept his existence and so on. Now, whether I would worship that God or not that could be another discussion altogether. But yeah, I think we'd like to pride ourselves on being evidence led, and I think if it's overwhelming, as Matt Dillahunty, who's a very well known atheist, says all the time, that that God would know what it took to convince me. So I'll use that. I'll use that. That's something Matt Dillahunty often tends to say. So.
And how about yourself, Gavin? Are you 100% fixed on your Christian belief, or I guess could not necessarily atheism, but if evidence was presented for another religion or something else, are you open to it?
Absolutely. I think because I guess we're all trying to search for truth, or what's right, or the best way to live our lives, and what makes us happy. And I guess if there was overwhelming evidence or an experience that was so evident that it was true, I would have to change my position, because I guess at the end of the day, like you guys, we want to kind of go after what's true and right. So I would be prepared for that.
So I guess I'll throw to Jeff, and Jeff, obviously, I'll get you. Is there anything that you want to ask Gavin about his position?
No, I mean, I think he's put it quite succinctly, but I mean, because I didn't have a lot of questions written down, because one or two of what I did have, Gab's already kind of answered. I've got to say that, but so I mean, I guess it could be a good sort of thing of like what I think it could be a good question for both of us might be, what sort of thing would like convince you to maybe have doubts on your position or whatever? Just as if you could give an example, we'll just see where this goes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have doubts regularly, or doubts and frustrations, I would say, because the world doesn't quite look how I would. If I was God, it wouldn't, it wouldn't look like how it is. That's the truth. So, my doubts are around why do people suffer? Why do even my own family members have suffered and been through a lot of painful experiences? Why do bad things happen? And the truth is, if I was the deity, I would do it differently. That probably answers where my doubts come in. And many, I would say my doubts changed as well. So my doubts that I had maybe 20 years ago, some of them have been answered. Some of them I feel more satisfied that I understand. And there are others where I'm still doubting or not satisfied with. So,
yeah, that's it. That's quite interesting. Which I think that in a way that's good that there is a sort of healthy amount of skepticism from yourself then, which I think is I think is very healthy, and certainly something that we in I suppose in our community a lot of atheists like to I will say sometimes we like to try and take the moral high ground on skepticism. That sometimes, and I'm sure Chris will agree with me here, we look at some of the things we hear other atheists in our community blurting out at times that we're like, yeah, you're throwing any pretenses of skepticism out of the window here.
There's some very, very religious atheists out there.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Sometimes we do sort of see ourselves sort of like, oh, Richard Dawkins said it, so it must be true, kind of thing, and we've seen that ourselves. So, so that's very good to hear. So, if you had a question you want to fire back at me, Gav, at all?
Yeah, I suppose I'd be interested. You talked about growing up with a few assemblies at school and a kind of glimpse at the Christian faith, and it was just dull and boring. I think that's kind of what you were saying.
Yeah.
Just wondering, do you think your experiences of a kid has shaped your views on Christianity now, as in how you view it, or is it an informed position of what you currently see?
I'd like to think it's an informed position. Okay, and I might also open to the fact that I may be wrong on that. Yes, definitely the kind of Christianity that I was exposed to young was very bland. And I'll say it's something I didn't mention earlier, which perhaps I should have done. When my late teens or whatever, I was going for a little bit of a bad period or whatever, and there was a very well-meaning friend of mine who was a Christian who actually kind of gave me a Bible to read, and I did. I mean, it's been, and I will say I'm no biblical scholar. It's been so long since I've read through it. And I think, this is definitely more Chris's area than it is mine. But there was an awful lot in there that when I read through the Bible, that just, if I was looking for answers, I didn't get it. I'll put that very, succinctly. I did not get it. I did not get answers from that book.
Sure. No, that's fair enough. And the truth is, probably for myself, I have some answers from it, but not all the answers necessarily. I'm still thinking, searching, looking. So yeah, no, I appreciate it. I guess it's just to know a bit more of your background and how you've kind of come to your position. Because I think for me personally, although I didn't have a Christian upbringing, in some ways that was better for me, because I think if I'd had anything forced upon me, my natural, just because I know how I am, I would probably rebel against that, because no one's telling me what to do, sort of thing. So I'm just, we're all different, and some people, can be brought up in different beliefs and go along with it. But yeah, I know for me, it was definitely having that freedom of choice was probably the best thing my parents did give me. I remember they said when I was younger, we're not going to put any religion or belief on you. When you're old enough, you make that decision, you make that choice. And I think they were a little shocked when I did. But at the same time, they're all good with me now. So, yeah.
Which I'm pretty sure, certainly most of my audience would respect that sort of decision as well, because there's certainly a lot of people in our community, especially with a lot of the Americans that are in our community, that very much came from a very dogmatic kind of Christian upbringings, and they've I mean, one of the reasons like these online communities and atheist communities exist, probably more so in America than they do, say, in the UK, is that there is the need for, I mean, humans are a social species. We need community, and a lot of people, when they've had their doubts or have come out as atheists, they've been sort of shunned by family and friends and whatever, and so there's been that need to. I'm not saying that doesn't happen here, but I don't think it's such a problem in the UK.
I think just to kind of just to add a thought, I think like you were saying, in the atheist community there are kind of different beliefs people. There are maybe people that are kind of more left, central, or right, depending on what the subject is. I think within the church being such a massive, can't call it an organisation, although we could. It's just, I think we do hold very different beliefs. So there are a lot of, I've seen some of your tweets, some of the ministries you talked about, and I'm thinking I'm absolutely in agreement with what you're saying. I think there's so much, excuse my language, so much bollocks out there that I don't.
Yeah, swear all you like. Sorry, Gal, to interrupt. So you can swear all you like on this channel.
That's cool. That's cool.
In fact, it's actually expected, I think, on this channel, isn't it, Jeff? Yeah.
You've got the right person on with me then. So definitely, but there are things, there are areas of Christianity I can't accept, and usually it's people, it's positions, and it's probably the more right wing Christianity I can't really align myself to, because let's be honest, there's abuse. You know, there is abuse, of spiritual abuse and mental abuse that has happened, and that's not what I believe in.
Okay, yeah, okay, which is good. I think, there's very few conversations we've had. I know you. I definitely got the feeling that you were not a big fan of like televangelists who scam people, or the sort of the Kenneth Copelands of this world, or even some of the young earthers like sort of the Ken Hams and Kent Hovins of this world. I definitely got the impression that you weren't really a fan of those people.
Yeah, so. I've given them a listen, because I think you've got to hear them before you kind of see what you think, judge them and stuff. But it doesn't. That's not who I am, to be honest. So yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's very good to hear. So, but maybe I'd ask, because you said you've been through a lot of very different sort of, I suppose you've been through some various churches of different denominations and different ideas. I mean, I guess it could be a difficult question to answer, because they may have all their very different perspectives on this. But what is the general perspective on atheists that you think a lot of Christians hold, or what do you think of their general perspectives, or maybe misconceptions that are maybe held, and maybe that could,
that's a really good question, Jeff, and probably one that I can't give a simple answer to, but I can give my own perspective of what I see. And I think it's probably changed over the last 25 years. So I would say when I probably first stepped into a church, there would have been more than, a bad feeling towards atheists, that they are wrong. They are, they are opposing what we believe in, blah, blah, blah. Whereas I would say my experience now is very different to that. And actually, there is more of a belief that we're all on it's a bit of a cliched word and overused, but all on a journey through life, and we're all on the easiest way to call it is a spiritual journey, whether that is believing or not believing. We're all searching, should I say, for truth. And I think there is more of an acceptance that actually people do have different positions, people do have different belief systems, and that's okay. You're not our enemy, and neither are we your enemies. It's I think I saw something on Facebook a few months ago, and really this to me is my position, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but I think it's along the lines of, there's a Christian, a Muslim, a Jewish person, a Hindu, and an atheist all in the pub, and they grab a beer, they sit down, and they have a laugh, and the reason why is because none of them are arseholes. And I think for me, that's that kind of, I'll paraphrase massively, but I think for me, that's kind of the position I'm in. And most of the people I know that I would go to church with are, our friends would hold very different views to us, and it's all right. And it's more interesting to hear from different views than just people who think the same.
Yeah. Well, it's just one of the reasons. Well, when you approached me as well, I was very eager for us to have this kind of conversation, because I often feel a lot of the times with a lot of these things on YouTube that you got people talking past each other rather than to one another. And you know, and it seems to be, you know, people, and I will say this, on both sides, who are looking to get the other side in a kind of gotcha kind of thing. I mean, I will say that, you know, with some of them, these discussions, even though they can get repetitive or whatever, that they are needed still, because particularly when we look at, say, the United States, when things like young Earth creationism, which is a position that, in my opinion, is demonstrably wrong, is being sort of legislated back into like school curriculums and that, then there those sort of discussions about why young Earth creationism is a completely wrong position need to be had. And you know, so in those kind of respects, I guess,
well, just to quickly ask the question, just so we've got it clear, Gavin, what's your position on the age of the Earth?
Yeah, I was waiting for that one. Do you know what? I probably I started off going for the older, you know, that the Earth is, a new Earth, thinking it was quite a new Earth. But as I've gone sort of on this sort of journey of faith and looked into it, I'm probably swaying towards more that it's not, because one, the scientific evidence is saying that it is old, and secondly, I think the way, and this is happening a lot now, the way I read the scriptures is a lot different. So there's a lot, whereas maybe 20 years ago people were reading it as in, it says this, it means this. There's a lot more understanding coming out that actually a lot of the books weren't written in a way that was absolute. A lot of it was storytelling and so on, so on. So it is about interpretation. So the more I've studied that and looked into that, my position has changed. And although it's changed to starting to believe actually more in that older Earth, if evidence then comes back and shows me otherwise, I would be prepared to go back again.
Yeah. Okay.
But it doesn't look like that way at the moment.
I'll say that there's going to have to be overwhelming evidence to throw out everything that science has discovered over the last few hundred years on the age of the Earth. It would have to be something very, very overwhelming. And you know, as I often sort of, I mean, as I've said to creationists or whatever, that have sort of said, well, you know, science is a bit of an echo chamber kind of thing. And it's like, well, I said, are you kidding? It's just, if there was a scientist who proved that the Earth was like 6,000 years old, they're going to win a Nobel Prize. You know, that's it's a self-correcting process all the time. And as I always point out as well, I think some people on both sides sometimes get this wrong, but you know, theory of evolution or whatever has nothing to do with creation whatsoever. That it's not a position that negates, or you know, the existence of a god. It's just, you know, it's an explanation of you know, how life diversifies, really. It'd be just a layman's way of putting it, but you know, but that's obviously a conversation that we're going to have with Bobby Mack on this one at a time. It's the evolution one, I think, isn't it? So
yes, that's a Bobby Mack one.
Yeah. So so you got something you'd like to ask me, Gav? Or
yeah. So what would you say? You've talked about science being sort of really important, or the evidence of stuff is really important to you. Is that the major factor for you holding an atheist position?
It could be scientific to an extent, and a little bit, I suppose, philosophical to a degree as well. I mean, definitely when it comes to things like the personal experiences that I had or whatever, which had to do more with the Norse gods, and And I think a lot of that as well, that if perhaps had I been looking for answers in like a Christian church, I'd have got a personal experience which would have been Jesus or something, or if I was going into a Hindu temple, I would get a Hindu god or something. And so I think, when I look back on it, when I had those experiences, there might have been like a kind of a confirmation bias going in about what you wanted to. Even though that experience is really powerful and really convincing, when I look back on that logically, and obviously there is a bit of the science, knowing the way I mean, I'm no expert in this whatsoever, but just reading a little bit the way the human brain works, which can be quite fascinating. So I did ask myself this question. I was in a sort of like a situation where I was around Norse pagans, and I had that interest. So when I had that kind of like meditation kind of experience, and I got experience of Thor and Odin, and I think Frey, I think was the other one. That I feel there was a confirmation bias going in to that, and I feel maybe if I had that same thing going into a church, that I'd had that experience, but it would have been Jesus or something. Do you see where I'm coming from on that?
Yeah, so basically your environment does slightly inform your decision making, or probably everybody's, to be fair.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed, I think that's and because again, like for example, if you are brought up, I mean, generally, if you're brought up in, say, Christianity, not necessarily in every case, but the chances are you're going to grow up to be Christian. Not always the case, but I suppose the odds. That's what the odds would sort of say. But I know people, obviously, like yourself, who when were not brought up religious, who are now hold like a position with they're Christian, or hold other positions, whether it be neo-paganism or Islam or whatever it may be. So
yeah, well, it's interesting because I've got two kind of grown up daughters. I've got one that's 22 and one that's 17, and obviously when they were younger, they did come with us to church, and I was challenged on that by some friends. Why are you brainwashing them? And I said, well, they're young and they're going with us. If I was going to a football match, they would come with me because it's a childcare. But we've kind of approached things with them in the same way that you need to make your own choices. Actually, it's no good just kind of bolting onto your parents' beliefs, because it doesn't make it genuine. And I wouldn't want that anyway. I'd rather my daughters kind of had their own belief system and it was genuine to them. So, and they have done. And it wouldn't be the same as my belief.
So I've got to highlight this comment. Dave, you're wrong. You're wrong. All children should follow Southampton Football Club.
This is where I'm going to step in as the moderator, because that's clearly incorrect. And Dave is 100% correct. And for the sake of this conversation, you should not indoctrinate your children in anything red and white unless it's the St. George Illawarra Dragons.
Well, Jeff will appreciate this, but my eldest daughter is her fiance is from Portsmouth, which is my biggest. Yeah, I've had to cope with that one.
They used to have a football team, didn't they?
They used to have, yeah. Well, apparently,
allegedly. But as I said, I don't have any problem with someone who says they're a Portsmouth fan, because admitting you've got a problem is always the first step, But anyway, I think this is coming off topic a little bit. So just trying to think of a question to, because I think I mean a lot of what I had in my mind you've kind of already answered, Gav. So I'd say, I mean I'd sort of say then, what sort of your opinion or whatever, what makes and I think even Chris might have a good opinion on this, but your opinion, what makes like a good pastor as opposed to being like a bad pastor, like in a church? I just maybe like to get your opinion. Maybe Chris has got an opinion on that as well, but
Yeah.
I'm a great one.
Yeah.
No, that's a good question. I think I've experienced good and bad, and obviously different people have different expectations. So what's good for me may be bad for someone else. But for me, the same as I would say what makes a good human being, someone that's kind, someone that's generous, somebody that's treats me fairly, and listens and understands the differences of opinions. So for me, the question about what makes a good pastor is the same as what makes a good human being. So
that's yeah.
You don't expect just because somebody holds a position. Yeah, I think there is some expectation for them to live to a certain standard because they've got a public position. As much as other public positions, you have to kind of be careful of what you do and say. But for me, it's about how you treat people, and part of that is allowing disagreement and not having the pastor isn't God as such.
Yeah.
That actually allowing differences of opinion. So I've definitely had differences of opinions from the pastors I've met, and most of them have been cool about it. There's been a few that haven't, and I haven't seen them for a while.
Yeah, because I think this would be the thing that where I have the issues, not so much the past as it's more like I think it's always a good sign. Might be a good sign if there is a pastor you can have a disagreement with and it be on something and it be okay, because that's a good sign that they're not a cult leader type, which is generally where where a lot of us in this community make videos. Those tend to be the sort of people we tend to go after. I mean, last year we had a number of us in the community had a big run-in with the New Independent Fundamentalist Baptist Church, who are, I mean, very hardcore Old Testament kind of, and to be honest, most of what they do is gay bashing. Is most of what they do, in all honesty, and I think it's almost more about that than anything to do with God in a way. So
I think I would align my kind of beliefs with you on that. I mean, in the sense of the church I go to now, we definitely have gay people that come along. We have people that do not have a faith that would attend, people that are kind of searching, trying to figure it out. And then we have people that are maybe a bit more traditional in their views as well. But it's, for me, being someone that goes along, for me, it's important that actually it doesn't matter what you believe or your background or your color or creed, sexual orientation. Actually, you're a human being first, and that's the most important thing.
Okay, well, I guess on that question, because obviously, I mean, this might be a tricky one to answer. I'm not quite sure how to phrase this, but obviously, you look at obviously, if there's when you look at the Bible, especially a lot of the stuff in the Old Testament, you can see why someone like me would find that problematic, and even some of the stuff in the New Testament as well. But you could see where I would find that extremely problematic to me, and so I guess wondering do you think that like religious, say Christianity is something that needs to evolve with the times in terms of what its message is in that respect, or does it really need to or does it really need or this is why I'm having trouble phrasing this, that what is, I guess in a way it might go into your view.
I think I know what you're trying to say. I think you're going along the lines of with some of the, I guess, the old-fashioned things, especially in the Old Testament. Do you think that that's something that is relevant in modern society? Is that sort of what you're trying to get at?
That's the way. Yes, you've worded that far better than I did, Chris. So,
it's because in Australia we speak proper English.
Yeah.
I think coming down to that interpretation. So my belief is, and different Christians will have different beliefs, but my belief is that looking at the Bible, even Old Testament, New Testament, there are examples of lifestyles and positions or activities that were specific for that time. So ceremonial cleansing during a certain time actually would have been really good in those times hygienically, but there isn't necessarily a need for that. It's probably a bad example, but what I'm saying is I think there are items in the Bible that are good for a moment in time, but they're not necessarily appropriate thousands of years later or hundreds of years later, thousands of years later.
So would you accept then that obviously the Bible is a product of its time? You would accept that, would you?
So I believe there are, for me, there are timeless truths. So there is stuff in the Old Testament where I would say, yeah, I 100% still believe in that. I believe that is everlasting truth, and that's something I will believe in. But there's also stuff in there that I'm saying that's like a cultural element. So actually the part of the world it was in, or at the time it was in, it was appropriate for them. So for me, it's being able to distinguish what the author of the book was saying and the context of it really, and that's not easy. And I think what's happened in the past is what is said goes, and actually when you take that, it just contradicts. A lot of people said the Bible contradicts itself, and it does, because actually I think a lot of it is written for a time, but I also believe there is stuff that is forever.
Yeah. Okay.
Help. I know it's not an exact answer, but that's what I believe.
Yeah. That's I get that. I mean, what would your example be then as something that is an everlasting truth in your opinion? I'd just be interested to know that.
So something, I mean, probably an obvious one would be the 10 Commandments. Don't kill someone. I think is probably a good timeless truth that was true back then, and I think for me is true today. One that I would say that isn't appropriate is I know it's said about trying to think about women covering their heads. Actually, it was a cultural thing for me, not a and some Christians will disagree with me, but I believe that was a cultural issue. Actually, I've got a better one than that. So that in the New Testament, there's an example of where it says women be silent in the synagogue.
Yeah,
it comes across really offensive, and it offends me when I read it. I think that's offensive. We're equal. But when I looked into it, actually the context of that was that women and men sat separately. So the women sat high above and the men sat below, and that was their culture for that to happen. So what they were saying was women don't shout over the top. There was problems at that moment in time with women shouting over the top of the men. So the women be silent was in context to that, not women be silent. So for example, I believe men and women are equal. So what I'm trying to say is there is stuff that is timeless truths. I believe there is stuff that is contextual for a period of time or a culture, and and I'm not saying I've got all this right. I'm just saying this is my understanding of it, and that's how I'm navigating my beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, I mean, obviously, I mean, like 10 Commandments could be a whole another stream in itself. It really could, about each of them, because I mean, obviously the obvious one, thou shalt not kill, very good common sense. It's something, as people, we realize it is not it's not good to our society and our survival if we are just killing each other all the time. However, doesn't mean we live up to that a lot. We certainly don't. We're self-destructive as a species at times. Obviously some of those, like the commandments or whatever, to me are just like, I wouldn't see as relevant personally. But I think that could be because that's really, when you get into theology, which is definitely more Chris's area than it is mine. And that could be a whole another discussion in itself. So probably not get too deep into that. So, but so I don't know if there was anything you wanted to ask me, Gav, or we've got about 10-15 minutes left, I think. So
yeah, because I've been talking, I haven't had a chance to generate a question in my head. So I don't know if Chris got any questions.
Oh, look, probably something I would probably correct on from a theological point of view. The women not speaking in church, it's from Corinthians. It's a very clear instruction from Paul that women shouldn't be in roles of leadership, and they should. It's not a talking over the top. It's definitely a reference to women shouldn't be in leadership. And I know when I was in the church, we used to say, yes, that was for a different time. When it comes to the Old Testament, there's a lot of different covenants in the Bible. So a lot of the Old Testament stuff isn't necessarily relevant, and that's certainly how Christianity will put it forward. So, the whole go and stone your disobedient children and rules around slavery, things like that. That was from a theological perspective, that is under the Mosaic covenant. As opposed to the covenant of Jesus. Look, I guess if I were to, and if Jeff, if you don't like where this question goes, that's okay. But it's, I guess, just to get a bit of an idea of where you're at, Gavin, to ask you a straight up question: do you think that being atheist, myself and Jeff, would be going to hell? Do you believe in a literal hell?
Yes, well, let me answer that. Yes, I believe in a literal hell.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying yes.
No, that's right. Yep.
I don't know whether you're going to hell, and I don't know. I suppose, and this is probably the area I'm shifting on the most at the moment in my belief system. Mm-hmm. So if you'd asked me 15 years ago, I'd have probably been a lot more black and white about it. Mm-hmm. But I think I'm starting to look at things from a bit of a different point of view at the moment. I do believe that there is a hell. I believe that there's a heaven as well. But I think the Bible says God judges the heart. I believe in that, that God does look into the heart, and so if some, I know there is in the Bible it says about if you believe in your heart and confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, you will not be condemned, and a lot is built around that, as in you're out scenario, but I think that's very black and white, and I'm so to answer your question, yes, I do believe there is hell. It probably doesn't look like I've been taught to believe it looks like, but I can't. I don't think I've never said to anybody, I think you're going to hell. I just think, first of all, it's a pretty cruel thing to say, and secondly, from my belief, I'm not God, so I only really, from my position, he would know who's going there, or whether anybody's going there. I don't know. So I'm sorry to give a disappointment.
No. It's not disappointing. I'm glad you don't think I'm going to hell. But no, it's just more, I guess, to get a bit of an overall idea of, because there's obviously, and like you said, there's a lot of things in the Bible that are relevant, a lot of things that aren't relevant, and with Christianity, the Bible, and pretty much any religion, there's a million different interpretations and opinions on what that truth actually is, or how it's meant to be relayed, what people meant to put across. I guess probably one other question I'd ask is, do you believe that the Bible is the literal word of God? Do you think it's inspired? Do you think it's man's interpretation? What would your position on that be?
Yeah, I would say inspired. And so I where I said there are different aspects going on within the book. As much as if you went to a library and gathered a group of books, you would be getting different styles and different positions. I think it's the same. So I believe it's inspired. So when someone like Luke wrote, gospel, I would say that was inspired by God. So, but at the same time, I know there are areas in the Bible that I would say, like I've already said, are truths for a certain time and place. not necessarily relevant now. I still believe it's inspired, as much as I believe in the fact that if I was to pray in the morning, God, be with me today, I would say my day has been inspired by God, in the sense that I believe that I have a relationship and hear from Him and or get glimpses from Him. So I would say that is my day is inspired, and what I do is inspired. So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's good. I mean, it's a good answer to it. I mean, obviously, the whole hell thing is very problematic to me. Anyway, I think you would probably agree that Christians who try to use that as a stick to frighten people into belief that's definitely not the way to go about winning people to your side. I think you definitely agree with me on that perspective, though, wouldn't you, Gav? So
yeah, I'm not into it. I think they used to call it turn or burn, which is horrific. If I'm honest, so most of my friends are not Christians. They wouldn't call themselves, wouldn't hold a position at all, and so I don't go around preaching at any of my friends or kind of putting it upon them. A lot of them ask me questions because they're interested in my position as much as we're having a conversation now. Quite often I'm in a pub and the conversation ends up talking around Christianity, not because I've led it there, but because they have. And for me, that's, like I said, I believe everyone's on a journey of discovery in some way. And I think being open to that and just being friends with people, natural conversations happen. So I don't really feel the need to push my opinions on anybody. I think the quote, God knows, what was it? God knows me. It was a quote you used. God knows me, or knows what I would need to know to believe.
The Matt Dillahunty thing that, he's a very, very well known atheist sort of speaker, and so I suppose he obviously, you think of the real big names like the Richard Dawkinses, Sam Harrises, and so on. Dillahunty is probably just a tiny bit below them, but he's on that sort of level, I suppose. But his quote he quite often says is that when I think asked about what would you do, what would it take for you to change your mind, he said, well, if God is real, He would know what it took for Him to convince me of His existence. That's his where he's going with that argument.
But I kind of agree with that in the sense that obviously I believe in God, but I don't necessarily feel it's my job to convince anybody of His existence. I believe if He is God, that's His job, and I kind of go along with the ride. There is, don't get me wrong, I am honest about it, and I do tell people what I believe in if they ask, but I've never found it that helpful to push it upon anybody.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, it's funny something you said there. It took me back a bit because my conversion story is actually similar to yours. When I went into Christianity, I wasn't from a Christian family, and I had a lot of non-Christian friends, and it was usually they'd want to hit me up with all the questions, but it'd normally be at about 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday when we're all having a couple of beers at the pub, and then they'd want to get the deep theological conversation out of me. So I can appreciate what you're saying there.
Yeah, it does happen, and I mean sometimes I think, give it a rest. Do you know what I mean? Because it does happen. But no, I do like it in a way. It's just the timing of it is always impeccable.
It is.
Well,
I think I'm going to just go back on one thing really quickly. That verse in Corinthians where he talked about Paul saying it was around leadership, and I definitely agree with what you're saying. But I would say that wouldn't be the position the church I go to. So we would have women lead. In fact, the person running the church is female. So although I understand that, and my wife's parents strongly believe it, as you say, I would view it very differently to the maybe traditional view of talking about leadership. Although I know there is some context around that, I believe there is a bit more to it. But hey, we're allowed to have different views.
Indeed.
That's why they had the Council of Nicaea, because they couldn't even agree back then.
Yeah, and even after that, you still had like there was that other branches like the Arian Christians. I think what I know about them is they didn't accept like the Trinity or something, and there was a big I mean, Christianity is like as a history of different schisms and so on. On interpretation.
What's the saying? If you want to know what's wrong with the First Baptist Church, go and ask the people at the Second Baptist Church.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But like I said, it's not that we don't see like tribalism and that on our side as well. We definitely do see it. In fact, actually, Chris on his own channel spoke a bit about this several weeks ago. When he stream he did called the Cult of Atheism, which was interesting.
I know. I got attacked for upsetting the followers of the atheist prophets.
Yeah, it's
geez.
Yeah, which
humans.
is
we're funny.
It is weird. It's weird because if you know some of the people that they're sort of defending, like the Matt Dillahunties or Aaron Raz or whatever, they would probably be more than saying, no, don't follow every word I say is absolute truth. No.
They do. They quite literally have to tell people that.
Yeah.
But it's, people bow down at the altar.
Yeah. But I just said we're kind of coming up on the hour, and I appreciate it's getting on a bit for you, Chris. First of all, I'll just say, Chris, thanks to you for agreeing to come in and have this conversation. So I just wanted to say, do you want to plug anything you got coming up on your channel this week or coming up? No.
Heaps of stuff. Always got stuff coming up. Conspiracies tomorrow night with Bobby, Mac, and Jay. We're still in negotiations on the topic, and when I say negotiations, it means I've just got to work out what that topic is and let everyone know. And Friday Night Six Pack. That's on Friday night for me, Friday morning for the US, Friday afternoon for the UK. If you watch the channel, you can work out the time it's going to be on. So.
It's the same time we started this stream. Just it usually 6 pack on a Friday, which is a bit more. I mean, okay, there's usually a sort of serious thread to run through it, but generally it's a little more light-hearted. And generally, a few Aussies and a couple of guests.
It's serious conversations while having a couple of drinks. It's like when you're sitting at the pub and you solve the world's problems. That's kind of what we do. We just do it on a stream.
Yeah. Dave's put the link to that. Also,
incidentally, this is the easiest thing I've ever had to mod in my life. Like,
I'm glad.
Can you guys just like swear at each other or call each other bastards or something, just so I've got something to
do? Jeff knows he's a bastard. I don't need to call him one.
Well, I can't argue with that, actually.
I know it's not on your channel, Chris, but I believe you're performing a wedding ceremony soon as well.
Yes, it's coming up. Yes, the wedding of Kent Hovind and Darth Dawkins. It'll be good. It's going to be very nice. We're just working the date. It wasn't meant to be on the 16th of June, but it looks as though we might be moving it back a week, just because we've got a lot of people who want to be involved. It's it's when two people fall in love, everyone sort of wants to be a part of a special day. So that'll be over on Godless Granny's channel, but more information will be forthcoming.
Yeah, I'll just say, Gav, if you haven't heard of Darth Dawkins, you won't know what we're on about here. But on the plus side, you haven't heard of Darth Dawkins.
Darth Dawkins would. Yeah, I reckon there's a lot of Christians out there who would listen to Darth Dawkins and just want to belt their head against a wall because he makes it very easy for atheists. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
He's not a great representation of the Christian community. So
I'll also say I'm not going to name names, but there's one or two, I should say, atheists who I see get on debates and I'm there like, it's like
I can think of a couple.
Well, okay. I want to say thank you to Gav today. I know that this isn't something you're used to doing, and you're coming into an environment here where you're kind of the odd one out here. So So I appreciate that. That takes a bit of courage to do, and I appreciate that. We've had a very frank, honest, and open discussion. Maybe we ought to do something like this again sometime. We'll maybe sit down and watch some, watch some Kent Hovind videos or something, and have a laugh over it.
That could be good. It'd be interesting to see how you react to some of the more fundamental nut jobs. And because I know how I used to react to them. Maybe some Kent Hovind, some Ray Comfort, all the good stuff.
Are you familiar with Ray Comfort at all?
I am.
Yeah, okay.
You don't go around giving out £1 million notes, do you, to people?
No. No, it's not my thing. It's not my thing.
And I also just want to say, I want to say thank you to the live chat. I did ask at the beginning to kind of keep this sort of civil, and I don't think anyone's had to be timed out or anything. So I appreciate that from everyone today. I think we've had a very good conversation. So I thank everyone who's taken part in this. So as for myself, I believe it's Sunday. I've got my regular stream with Hissy, where we're going through the Asterix books, which are a bit more light-hearted and things. That's what I've got kind of coming up on my channel this week. Other than that, I don't really have anything penciled in. I will say though, after this stream is finished, anyone, please go over to Critical's channel, where for his critical questions quiz, which is always a lot of fun. I believe I'm supposed to be hopping over there in a little bit to take part in that as well. So please check that out. Other than that, this has been Jeff, aka Godless Scummer. So for myself, Gavin, and from Chris, Atheist Pastor. Shall see you guys later. Okay, salute.